So good morning, everybody. I'm Margaret Boobin. I'm with Penn State Brandywine and a member of the DC TMA board. This morning, I'm very proud to introduce Thomas Bonner. He's the manager of state government affairs for PECO. Tom is a senior manager in the State Government Affairs Office with the primary responsibility for analyzing the impact of federal, state, and local policy challenges on the company's leading internal teams to develop climate and clean energy policy and business solutions. During his time with PECO, Mr. Bonner focused on both policies and programs advancing new technologies, including serving as the lead author of PECO's successful $200 million grant for smart grid investment with the U.S. Department of Energy. In addition to representing PECO in numerous state and local stakeholder forums, he currently serves as on the board of directors of the Eastern Pennsylvania Alliance for Clean Transportation and Transportation Management Association of Chester County. Prior to coming to PECO in 2007, he served as manager, Congressional Relations for Mid-American Energy Holdings Company for more than a decade, and as Associate Director of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Washington, D.C. office. From 91 to 95, he worked in the U.S. House of Representatives as a senior legislative staffer. Tom holds a Master of Planning degree from the University of Virginia and a BA from the University of Pennsylvania. He lives in Chester Springs. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Bonner.
Hi, everybody, and given the location of folks in the room, I hope you don't mind if I just step out from the podium and speak. My wife always says that I'm whispering challenge, so can everybody hear me fine? All right, great. So I want to start off with just, I think most of you know what PECO is, who we are, but this is going to be important when we talk about the implementation of the NEVI plan in a moment. So we serve the city of Philadelphia and the borders surrounding suburban counties, all of Delaware County, and then almost all of Bucks, Montgomery, and Chester, then a little bit of Lancaster County with natural gas and a little bit of York County with electric service. This area is probably about 5% of the surface area in the state of Pennsylvania. It also has around 40 to 50% of the electric vehicles existing in the state. So it's a heavy concentration of EVs in our comparatively small geographic footprint. And as the state looks at how they're going to be implementing the NEVI program, that's going to become important. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So PECO, the work we're doing in this regard is a part of our, what we call Path to Clean. Path to Clean was a commitment that the company made in August of 2021 to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions of our operations by 50% by 2030 with the goal of achieving net zero by 2050. When I say with the goal, we always like to put in that caveat because this is dependent on a couple things that aren't here today in 2024. We don't have some of the state policies in place that would be necessary to accomplish this. And then the second thing is you need certain technologies that are not there yet. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the context of our vehicles. So the second half of Path to Clean is the main thing we're here to talk about today, which is supporting customers and communities in reaching their clean energy goals. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed in 2021, and then the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 have been probably the single largest catalyst of federal action toward emissions reduction and clean energy ever enacted in the United States. Our goal from day one of those bills passing has been to help our customers and communities bring as many of those dollars back home as possible. The way I see it, as taxpayers, we're all paying in for it. So we may as well, make sure we get as much out of it as we can. Show the truck there. That is one of our PECO F-150 Lightnings. That's a fully electric vehicle. We have a number of those as part of our fleet. We also hosted this year, well, it was actually the fourth time in 5 years, the Philadelphia Auto Show, and there we debuted our first fully electric bucket truck. So the vehicles that are actually out on the street after the storm, helping put the wires and transformers back up, fully electric vehicle. Now, I mentioned earlier about to get to net zero, you may need some technologies that don't exist today. In the utility industry, we are reliant on what's called mutual assistance for responding to large storms. So I had the great pleasure of being in the PECO Storm Center. Somehow I'm always on when we have the biggest storms. So I got Hurricane Irene, Hurricane Sandy, the 2014 ice storm. Michelle knows this. Last August, we had a storm. I'd just gotten promoted into like a bigger role, and then we had another one in January. I'm always on. But when we have major storms in our industry, we don't have all the resources locally to respond to an event of that size. We rely on our colleagues all throughout the country to provide us resources to respond to major storms, and then we do the same when when the Gulf Coast gets hit by a hurricane, or you have a hurricane down in Florida or something like that. That requires sending these big heavy-duty vehicles, up to 1,000 miles plus. We don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to take something as big as a bucket truck and send it down to Louisiana and not have it, losing a lot of time stopping and charging. So for something like that, for our power restoration fleet to go fully electric, we would need an even more robust national infrastructure plan to serve medium and heavy duty vehicles. That's not in place at this time. Ideally, someday it will be. But we have to see how that plays out. The other thing is we don't know if that infrastructure is going to be electric vehicles. It could be hydrogen vehicles, where it's easier to have that type of national heavy-duty infrastructure to do fueling, where you can move trucks and vehicles like that over the interstates over thousands of miles. So that all remains to be seen. So as I mentioned, the day the IIJA passed, because of my background, I was tasked with tell us every way that ourselves and our communities might be able to benefit from this. So we prepared this slide. On the left-hand slide, on the purple, those are things that we as a utility can apply for. Those are programs that are really aimed at upgrading the reliability and resiliency of our national electric grid. The one that's highlighted in yellow is the one we identified as our best opportunity. That was called the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnership, once DOE put a label on it. They offered up to $100 million for companies to upgrade their electric infrastructure, make it more resilient and reliable, and also more able to handle clean energy. So we applied for that. While I was the prime author of our 2009 Smart Grid grant, this time, because I had other responsibilities, all I had to do was write the community benefits plan for this, which was how we were going to work with the community to achieve some of the social objectives that the administration had with the IIJA. Once again, we were successful. We were the only utility in the country that won a maximum award in 2009, and then the next time the federal government put out an opportunity to get large funding to upgrade the grid, we also won a maximum award this time. We at PECO are pretty proud of that. I will confess I'm a little proud of the role played in both of those. So as part of that, we are the biggest component, the biggest single component is in what's called the lower south area of Philadelphia, down by the stadiums, the airport, the port, the old Philadelphia refinery. We're building a new substation. We were at like 95% capacity down there, and that's one of the fastest growing areas of our territory. So we're building a new substation so that that big economic driver for the region can continue growing. In Delaware County, the main thing we're doing is along the Amtrak corridor of I-95. Those are some aging facilities. Amtrak needed to upgrade those. the local communities in Delaware County also needed reliability upgrades and increased capacity. So we're going to be upgrading those facilities along the Amtrak corridor in Delaware County up into Philadelphia in 95. We have 2 substations that we thought were outside of the floodplain because they were engineered to be outside of the 100-year floodplain. And then Hurricane Ida came along. And we realized we now, because of changing weather patterns, we need to locate those outside of a 500-year floodplain. So we're relocating 2 substations. One is kind of on the border of Montgomery and Delaware County. It's called Barbados Island. And we were struggling with what to name it. And where we're putting the station is called Black Snake Island, and nobody wanted to call it Black Snake Island, but it's like right off Lower Merion. So I was pitching to name it Mamba, which is still a black snake, but it's like right by where Kobe Bryant grew up. I lost out on that one. But we're doing the Grid Resilience Project next 5 years, $100 million in really nuts and bolts infrastructure investment in our system. And then we get to all these partnership opportunities in the green. And the big one you see there, what we're going to focus on the left, is the EV corridor. So the goal of this program, it's now called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, is to ensure that any American can buy an electric vehicle and have a place to charge it on our primary interstate and U.S. highway corridors. The requirement under the law is that charging stations get put in every 50 miles on these corridors. That you have multiple high-speed chargers available that are interoperable and able to pay under any system. So one of the concerning things as the EV infrastructure started developing over the first 5-10 years is every manufacturer of equipment wanted to sell their proprietary solution and lock you as the site host, the owner, into their system for as long as you're going to have that charging station, lock anyone who wanted to use it into having to have that app and give them your data, and you'd be on their payment plan. Similar to what Tesla did, but Tesla, they built their network out for their own vehicles. This is supposed to be a national system that anybody can use, and I think Congress very wisely said, if you're going to get money under this program, you have to put in stations that any car can use, that anybody can pay with a credit card, and any vehicle and isn't locked into a particular network. That, I think, was a really good policy move by Congress and a good structure for the program. So of that $5 billion, Pennsylvania is getting $171.5 million. We'll take a moment to compliment PennDOT. PennDOT was the second state transportation agency in the country to actually energize a charging station under this program. It was a rebuild of a previously existing station. They are into now their 3rd round of putting RFPs on the street for charging stations to be built. There are some states, New York, for example, that has not put their first RFP out on the street for NEVI charging stations. So PennDOT is doing an absolutely terrific job of getting this program up and running, identifying sites for the charging stations that meet these NEVI requirements, and then getting projects rolling. Other things I'll just talk about briefly, there's something for virtually everyone in IIJA. One that we are particularly interested in also in the EV space, we have EVs for underserved communities. That ended up being called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. So that is the more locally focused program to provide EV access at the community level. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission applied for the first round of this program last year, as did the City of Philadelphia. Neither of them were selected for the competitive grant. Actually, no one in Pennsylvania was selected for the competitive grant opportunity. So this time around, the DVRPC and the city are working together, and they've got a commitment from PennDOT that while PennDOT is not going to be a partner in it, they will provide support for the project. And they want to do a big region-wide CFI application They're doing a great job getting organized. We're expecting that the next opportunity will open up in late summer. And PECO, we're working with them. We filed an incentive program to try to make sure that we can help those stations get built, help municipalities especially meet the 20% match requirement that's required by the government. So, and I didn't mention earlier, for both NEVI and this CFI program, you need to have the federal government provide 80% of the cost, and then non-federal sources need to provide a matching 20%. For that matching 20%, part of it can be incentives that we as PECO offer, which we had not filed publicly when I prepared this presentation, so I'm just going to have to verbally talk about what we offer. Other things, clean school buses. We did a webinar yesterday with a company called Highland Electric that does really turnkey EV school bus projects. It's a great opportunity if you're like me and you had kids riding school buses for, in my case, the last 25 years. Those older diesel buses can be quite honestly dirty. And that's where we have our kids sitting on the roadside waiting to get on a bus. The bus stops, the diesel exhaust pops out. The electric school buses are a tremendous opportunity for positive health outcomes for our communities and especially for our kids. Pennsylvania didn't get any grants in the the Philadelphia area didn't get any grants in the first round. We did get a couple in the second round. The School District of Philadelphia and William Penn School District were both successful applicants. We continue to try to get the word out about the availability of that program. And I'll point to my colleague, Monica Bona, in the back there. Monica, raise your hand. Monica has worked on virtually every large EV charging project in the region over the last 5 or so years. She knows this stuff like the back of her hand. We're very generous in volunteering Monica's time to help support these projects. She will work with any applicant once they file a service and meter application to help sort out where's the best place to put the charger, to bird dog the application through our processes for interconnection. We want to bring the dollars home. This is another example of that. A couple other things I'll mention. There are programs for efficient renewable schools, low income weatherization, and these additional opportunities. Transit, we're supporting SEPTA's efforts on their zero emission bus program. The airport, we provided support and we're working with them on energy efficiency upgrades to the terminals. And then I think everybody here, well, maybe you haven't, there's the Delaware Valley region won a grant up to $750 million to create what's called a hydrogen hub in the region. We're supportive of that. We're still trying to figure out what our role is because there are no such things as hydrogen utilities today. But when these things start getting built, they're going to need electrical capacity and interconnection. They're going to need gas supply and volume upgrades. So we're working with the hydrogen hub on that. So transportation electrification. What do we do? And then I'm going to go into why do we care. So we've been a leading stakeholder in Pennsylvania promoting transportation electrification. We're an anchor partner with the state's Drive Electric PA Coalition. We funded the first ever EV adoption forecast along with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, where we wanted to look at where the first adopters of these vehicles were going to come online, match it against our distribution system, see if we were going to have any early challenges in terms of capacity. Two pieces of good news. One, what we found out is it's very possible to do good transportation modeling. We looked at maps they produced in 2011, 10 years out, and they almost perfectly predicted where EVs were going to be adopted in the region. They used what is the income criteria, what is the average length of commute, where are people making investments in clean energy, put this all into a matrix and came out with a map that was almost perfectly predictive. The other piece of good news is we found out that we did not have any immediate challenges in accommodating EVs. We believe we can accommodate all the reasonable expectations of EV growth well into about 2027, then we will start to see the earliest localized issues where we may need to upgrade a circuit or a feeder to support increased load, but those should be pretty limited and localized. I'll talk about that more in a moment. We host major stakeholder and public events, so we've been the sponsor of the Philadelphia Auto Show's E-Track and an EV education booth. But more importantly, we go around to organizations like this. We go around to the schools doing STEM education, talking to kids about if you're looking for a career and you're interested in someday being a planner, we need somebody to plan an entire new transportation infrastructure that's electrified. You're interested in chemistry, the whole world is about battery chemistries. That's probably the single greatest growth industry in energy. Computer science, an EV is a computer on wheels. Physics, engineering, you name it, there are great future opportunities. And we're also supporting local efforts on workforce development. Surprisingly, or maybe not your first thought, it's not about the vehicles. The vehicles are likely to need a lot less of a workforce to keep them up and running, because you're going from 2,000 moving parts that have to act in like pretty much perfect synchronicity to maybe 20 moving parts. That's likely to be less jobs for auto mechanics. But those chargers that are being funded under these big federal programs, they are supposed to have 97% uptime. Right now, unfortunately, when an EV breaks, sometimes they're calling up to New York or upstate New Jersey to have somebody come down from the central office to come and look at what's wrong with it. That's not going to work in the IIJA world. They're going to need to have, and we're all going to need to have, a local workforce that can do quick response to those stations and get them back up online. I will say, as an EV owner and driver, that's also really important, because when you need a public charging station, you need that charging station to work. You've planned your trip around, at this time, this is the location I know I can charge my vehicle and make it work with both my travel plans and not run out of juice. So that station better work. And that was another good thing they did in the IIJA. We offer incentives for infrastructure development. So out front, my friend, we got Chris Francisco. We also have Cliff Krause out there. Has a little brochure where you can get a QR code that lists all of our incentives. Bottom line, you can get half for what we call public benefit programs. So that's anything that's municipally owned. Right off the bat, you qualify if you're a municipality. Anything that is serving transit, paratransit, schools, anything in a PA environmental justice area, I'm going to get it, taxis or ride shares. All of those things all qualify as public benefits. They're eligible for up to $60,000 in infrastructure incentives, or $2,000 per charge port, up to a total of $60,000. So we offer that as an incentive to help get the infrastructure out there for the public to have confidence that they can buy an electric vehicle and not have to worry about its range. And then we have a web-based EV toolkit, so you can go to PECO.com/EV. You can say, okay, I'm currently driving a Nissan Maxima. I'm interested in an EV. I've looked at these three that seem like they would work for me. You can figure out what your fuel savings would be annually. We update the cost of gasoline in there all the time. What would be the environmental benefit of going electric? You can go on there and find what charging equipment is available, what federal and state incentives are available. You can get pretty much anything you want to know about EVs at PECO.com/EV. And then we assist legislators who are really working, trying to figure out how do we help this infrastructure come into place? How do we ensure it's equitable, that it's not just being built in the areas where people have lots of money and nasty old Tesla drivers like I used to be and Monica still is. We want to make sure that it's available to everybody, especially as used EVs start entering the market. And so we do a lot of meetings and discussions with our legislators, try to help shape that policy. We think there is a role for utilities in helping overcome the upfront cost of putting in EV charging through incentives like we currently offer, through what's called make-ready partnerships for large projects. So when you look at someday a trucking hub or like SEPTA might put together, or our school buses. We would like to do more there than we currently do to help people overcome that initial cost. With EVs, you got to pay up front. The vehicles are more expensive. The charging infrastructure is more expensive, but then you save on the back end on fuel. And we believe, and all of our experience tells us, maintenance as well. So we're working on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have our subject matter experts who can help you walk through what your needs are, walk through the PECO interconnection processes to do a project. So why do we care? Well, I would argue that everybody who pays an electric bill should care. Setting electric rates is really complex. We have a group of people on the 15th floor in our main office building who understand this stuff far better than I ever will. But the basics are, we've got the cost of keeping the system up and running, and that ends up getting divided by how much load is used, how much throughput we're putting through the system, and that sets your rate. So the more EVs we have, the more load we have, we put downward pressure on everybody's rates. We're making more efficient use of a fixed infrastructure. And electric vehicles are a very manageable load where we can, and most customers can, charge at times when there is excess capacity on that fixed infrastructure. So you're just making more use of what's already there. And that is a benefit for everyone. So an average EV contributes about $200, it's probably a little bit higher now than when I first created this slide, about $200 toward meeting that cost of system operations. We call it a revenue requirement. That's $200 less that everyone else has to pay to maintain the system. Now that holds true as long as you don't have to build new stuff because of the EVs. The good news here is that for the most part, you do not. So just to explain this graph, the green line, that is the summer. Our system is built to meet the peak summer demand. So the hottest day of the summer, the hottest hours, I say July 9th, it's 98 degrees outside, and our system peak comes between about 4 and 7 p.m. That's what our system is built to meet. All other times of the year, we have excess capacity under that red line. And you can see when you look at the purple chart, that is early morning on a beautiful spring day. That's about half of where we are in the summer. And it doesn't even matter that in late afternoon on a day like, today's going to be pretty warm, but we're going to go nowhere near peak. Even at those peak hours, you can still charge, and it's not going to have a system impact. We just have to keep charging as much as possible out of those peak hours. As long as you're doing that, you're taking advantage of underutilized available capacity on the system, and you're putting the incremental cost of every unit of electricity, you're pulling it down. Now, there will be some forms of EV usage that we probably can't manage and customers can't manage. When I'm driving on the interstate, when am I going to stop? Quick question, when anybody's taking a long trip, when do you stop your car?
Rest stop.
Well, rest stop, yes, but what time of the day?
Midday.
Well, midday, around lunch? You want to stop and get a bite to eat? Around dinner? Ooh, that's those peak hours. So, when people are doing interstate travel, they're going to stop their cars to charge at times they were going to stop otherwise. All the fancy numbers tell you that, and I'm going to tell you that from personal experience. Monica, is that true?
Yeah.
Yes. So some of that is going to be coincident, especially in the summer during heavy travel times with peak hours. That probably you can't mitigate very much. If I'm a bakery owner and I see a great opportunity for savings by electrifying my bakery vans, because they drive about 140 miles every day, nice fuel savings by going electric. But my problem is I got to have those vans on the road at 3, 4 in the morning, and I may need to start charging them on the tail end of our peak. That could be a challenge. So you're going to have some usage that you can't keep out of the peak, but most things you can by either what we call time of use rates, where you incentivize the customer to charge up those vehicles when it's in the middle of the night, you have lowest usage of the system, and you give them a lower rate for that, doing that charging. You're still getting something, but you're keeping their charging out of the peak. You can also, as people are already developing what they call demand management systems, where you can plug in and then you get either a message from us or a message from your little system controller that helps you minimize your bill, that tells you when to charge, when not to charge. Now, as an owner, when I come home from work at about 6 o'clock, I usually plug in my car. Why do I do that? Anybody want to guess? Because I'm lazy is the reason I do that. I can just as well walk out into my garage and plug in at 8 o'clock, but you're right, not forgetting is, and I have forgotten once or twice, but primarily because I'm lazy. That's the main reason people plug in right when they come home from work. So if you can put in systems where people can plug in because they are A, lazy, and B, they don't want to forget, but it doesn't start charging till you hit the hour of the day that PECO's offering the discounted rate, you can help manage that. So overall, we believe the benefits of customers electrifying for everyone, whether you own an EV or not, and this is a big misconception out there, are out there for everyone. We do need to work, especially as usage increases, to optimize those benefits and minimize the new infrastructure impacts as we get to levels of adoption that are 5, 10, 20 times larger than we have today. So a little bit of a diversion from NEVI, but I thought this would be good context for everybody. So back to NEVI. So we began planning a comprehensive strategy to support customers and communities to bring funding to the region day one. Right away, we met with state and local governments, and we said, what are you planning? How can we help? We also reached out to other key stakeholders. So we started talking to groups like the TMA, started talking to DVRPC, to SEPTA, to our schools, you name it, to identify opportunities and collaboration strategies. PennDOT, as part of the great job they did, they immediately started organizing all around the state, outreach sessions, talking to people, what do you want? Where do you want these things? They have some limits that are required under the federal law. A station has to be located within 1 mile of a highway interchange. So anybody here ever driven through like the South, or I'll throw New York under the bus here too, on the interstate, try to pull off, get gas, get a bite to eat. You see that sign that says McDonald's at this exit. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I could use a Shamrock Shake. And then you drive 4 miles along some country road to find it. You can't do that under NEVI. Under NEVI, if somebody's getting the funding under the program, it has to be within 1 mile of that interchange. That does create some challenges for PennDOT and other states, especially in more rural areas, but you're also not going to get caught driving 4 or 5 miles out when you are at very low range already. We developed our EV roadmap for customers proposing projects. I'll show you that in a second. And then with PennDOT, one of their questions was, what happens when we have what they call a node on the system, where we want to put a charger, all of our data shows us this is the right place to put a charger, but because it's a pretty lucrative location, we may have 6 different applicants. Is there any way you can tell us which one of these is going to be the cheapest to connect, or comparatively cheap to connect, and faster to get to market and to get built and energized? We said, well, we can't. It's hard to do because our system's dynamic. People are coming on and off the system all the time. You have to model it, make sure you're not going to have to upgrade the infrastructure there. But what we can do is kind of tell you red light, green light. So we can look at a system and give a pretty quick answer back to the applicant of, we don't need to do a line extension to put in the number of fast chargers planned at this site, at this location. Or alternatively, yeah, we're going to have to do some pretty significant system upgrades. PennDOT can take that information, and if they have 6 applicants, know that really only 2 of these are going to be viable places for them to consider, and then they apply it against the rest of their scoring criteria. There may be a case where they do have to do an upgrade, but a project is so much better than all its alternatives that they're going to go ahead and fund that one. But for the most part, it helps them sort out which of those projects look most appealing in terms of getting the infrastructure in place. This is really important to PennDOT, and it is really important to our area. I'll explain why. Under the federal law and the regulations, they cannot start putting more chargers in an area. They can't move beyond that 50-mile location until they have hit all of their every 50-mile nodes. So why is that important to us? Because even though we have 40 to 50% of the EVs in the region, you could satisfy that 40 to 50 mile stretch with 3 chargers in the Philadelphia area. Comes nowhere near meeting the demand, nowhere near producing an infrastructure that'll really meet our needs, but they got to get that done first. Now, PennDOT has been able to maneuver that. We'll call it maneuver it. I don't want to say manipulate. They've been able to maneuver it. It's maneuver because it's to our benefit, all of our benefit. They do have requirements under the environmental justice requirements, and then they look at specific corridors and say, well, we could use one there, and that provides every 50 mile along that corridor. So we've been able to get more projects in our region. I think, Monica, correct me if I'm wrong, we're currently looking at 13 in the Philadelphia area, which is more than those 3 that would have been the bare minimum. But PennDOT envisions, and we want to see a lot more. They can't do that until all projects that meet the minimum requirements are built. And we don't want to be the people that are holding up those minimum requirements to get built, because once they do the minimum, we're going to see a lot more investment in Southeast. And then we have an internal tracking system. So we can't say a NEVI project for an EV charger is more important than anything else and put it to the front of the line. Got a quick lesson in that when I called up to ask about one project that PennDOT asked about, and the project manager looked and he said, well, Tom, I currently have a veterans hospital or like a veterans healthcare facility that's ahead of that in line to be energized. Do you want me to put your charging station in line ahead of that veterans health facility? And I said, no, I do not. We stick to our processes. These projects are not more important than other processes, but we also are aware of the need to collaborate. So we keep an eye on them, and we track them, and we monitor them to make sure things don't fall through the cracks. And with EV infrastructure projects, because there's some responsibilities of the customer, some responsibilities for us, it's easy for things to fall through the cracks. So we're working to make sure that doesn't happen. The other thing we did is in September 2023, we got an extension of what's called our EV fast charging rider. Now, when someone puts in an EV fast charging station, their monthly bill is based on whenever the maximum usage of that station is. So there might be a time they put in 4 little charging ports, and there might be one time where all 4 of those are being used, but the whole station might only be used 18 times a month. We hope that's not the case. We hope it's more efficient, but it's going to take a while to build up the usage of that station. So while the usage of that station builds up, while more EVs get on the road, we give them a discount on that demand charge to let them kind of grow into the market usage, as otherwise you really get into a chicken and egg situation. So what we've done is we've extended that out so that it should hopefully be in place for the full duration of PennDOT implementing the NEVI program. So real early on, we had a discussion. This is that minimum 3 chargers to meet the minimum federal requirement. Talked with PennDOT and said, yeah, you could, if you wanted, build just 3 massive stations that meet these minimum requirements. There's a whole lot of reasons not to do that. One, it requires a large demand per site to make these things get to the economic point we want them to get to. They're going to be difficult to cite. There aren't going to be many municipalities that say, yeah, we want you to come in and build a 36 EV fast charger station somewhere in our community. Even if they wanted it, it's still going to take a long time to build something that big and get it all permitted. You're going to have big gaps in the way people actually travel regionally, because this would really just provide a north-south along 95, east-west along the turnpike. We know that's not how most people travel every day. You can't build the usage of that site by kind of the normal driving pattern that people have regionally. So you're not going to get those utilization levels up, and you're not going to be serving the public need. And those demand charges we talked about earlier would be really problematic for these sites. So what PennDOT is doing, and what we're 100% supportive of, is building more of a radial or hub and spokes approach, where they are funding more smaller stations at more intervals that are cheaper, smaller to build, that hit more of your kind of east-west commuter corridors, like around the area and into and out of the city, help them satisfy the environmental justice requirements that the federal government has, and really distributes the benefit more broadly for more people of having the availability of these stations. So that's another area I really have to commend PennDOT. It is harder to do RFPs for 13 locations than 3. The simple bureaucratic answer would be, let's just do 3 because that's easy. They're looking at this more thoughtfully, more comprehensively, and say what's going to serve the needs of a small geographic region that has a high concentration of EV drivers. So talked about earlier, these are some of the services that PECO provides. This is our EV roadmap. Anybody who's interested in doing an EV project, encourage you. You can take out your phone, get a picture of the QR code there. This guides you through the entire process from the moment you're ready to say, yeah, I think I want to look at installing some EV charging stations. I want to apply for, maybe participate in that DVRPC Clean Fuel Infrastructure Program. And what do I have to do? What is this going to look like? So the blue are all of your steps as a customer. The purple are all of our steps as the utility. You can use this to monitor your project, as your kind of guideline for your project. If I have, as the customer, I've done that middle row, customer submits local municipality permits from local municipality and arranges for private location markings. The next step is for our design technician to apply for our utility permits. And you can hold us accountable to that. You can call Monica or Chris, another one of our account representatives who's he's like our Monica in training. Is that fair, Chris? Yeah. Because we do know we need more people from our large customer services group who are expert in doing EV projects. It's just going to be something that is going to grow. So, Chris is on that first line of next people who become expert, and then we're going to continue training more because we know these things are just going to increase.
Application for SEPTA, so.
Oh, okay. So he's got it. But this helps you as the project sponsor understand every step of the process, where you are, and what needs to happen next. This is information we provide to potential project applicants, letting them know based on the size of their project what the likely timeline is for us being able to complete and then being able to energize the site. So 125 kW, that would be 2 lower speed, kind of older DC fast chargers that would not be NEVI eligible. But that's a relatively simple project, probably 2 to 4 months. 25 megawatts would be if somebody was building, say one of the large trucking companies was building a massive trucking hub. That would be 25 megawatts. I don't think we've gotten anything close to that yet, have we?
King of Prussia.
Wow, how big?
Yeah, I think it's Oh, no, not 25 megawatts, I'm sorry. It's about close to 40.
Close to 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the 25, that's something off in the future. 4, that's a big project.
Oh, yeah, that might.
Yes.
What is SEPTA's like bus depot plan?
Chris?
Is that gonna approach that? Or?
SEPTA has a, well, folks. So the S&M4s that we received were for 2 of the bus depots that there's an initiative for those 2 first.
Are they like, what level of megawatt?
I'm not too sure where they fall at, but my assumption would be, I know in total of all of them was about 10 megawatts.
So it'd be less than that on the individual sites,
On
yeah.
the individual, right.
Yeah, 25 megawatts is more like industrial kind of use.
Yeah. So a standard, a smaller NEVI project that is just 4 fast chargers would be anywhere from about 600 kW. That's about the lowest we would see for a NEVI project for 150s.
Yeah, I think it's 600 and 4 stations, so it's
Yeah.
200 kW, or 200 kW per station.
Yeah, and then some of the faster chargers, I believe now there is high capacity is like 350 kW. So there you'd be up above a megawatt just to meet the minimum 4 charge ports required under NEVI. Not that many cars today can even accept 300 kW at a time, but some people are building kind of future-proofing the speed of the chargers. And back to that earlier slide where we just had 3 locations, you can imagine if you were just trying to satisfy the NEVI requirement with 3 locations, you'd be looking at the bottom of that chart. Long lead times, very expensive infrastructure build out, and that's what we were trying to discourage, and we're really pleased that PennDOT didn't go in that direction. Always say early engagement is critical, so if you're thinking about it, hire an electrician, do your basics and get in a service and meter application and let us start looking at it. It's usually, right now we're seeing applications for NEVI are usually coming from either some large equipment manufacturers who are doing the projects for what are called the site hosts, or we're also seeing Wawa is getting very heavily into the sheets in areas that are served by sheets. All the turnpike charging stations, I think they have one contract with a company called Apple Green, which has already done some projects in New York up on the thruway. I've seen some of those are really nice. And Apple Green has the contract for the turnpike to do their NEVI stations. But mostly we're getting applications from pretty sophisticated players for that CFI, the program that DVRPC is running. That's what the average municipality can participate in. So a level 2 EV charger is kind of like a 10 kW, per port. And even if you were putting in a bank of 8, you're really very much on the low end of this. We usually don't have significant challenges with what are called level 2 charger projects. Those level 2 station can charge a vehicle. From my experience, like 27 miles in an hour is a pretty good rule of thumb.
What was that just? Did you say you can go 27 miles in 1 hour charge?
For a standard passenger car, the bigger the vehicle, the shorter the range you're going to get. But the other thing is, if you have a faster charger, you'll be able to get in more. And if the vehicle's equipped to get more charge. So a standard passenger car, I've got a Nissan Ariya, get about 27 miles of charge per hour off a level 2. On a DC fast charger, you can pretty much fully charge that vehicle in about 40 minutes. And that's from, run it down to 30 miles of range left on it, getting it back up to 280. But every car is going to vary a little bit based on the size of the car, and every charger is going to vary a little bit based on the speed of the charging equipment. And the last thing we have here, this is the form that we developed to help PennDOT out. It's our red light, green light form, where you just said, does this require a PECO line extension? When you put in, especially one of the fast chargers, we do give you credit against any cost of utility upgrades. We call it a revenue credit that we say, okay, for 5 years in the future, this is how much new revenue this new usage is going to generate for us. We're going to, whatever your cost of interconnection upgrades are, we're going to give you that amount as a discount. So it's a way we help support growth in the region. That's what I have for a formal presentation. I don't know if I've been talking long or talking short. I kind of lost track of time. But I imagine I still have some time left.
I believe.
Okay, open up for questions. Yes?
So, I mean, Exxon and, companies like that, they have gas stations, and PECO did thought about producing branded charging stations on their own, be direct seller.
So Pennsylvania law is, I would say, unclear as to whether utilities can own EV charging stations or not. Our colleagues in Pittsburgh, Duquesne, do own a couple stations, but they kind of own and operate them on behalf of the Pittsburgh Port Authority, which is their equivalent of SEPTA. For a utility, we need to know when we invest $1 in something that we can collect it back from the customers in rates. And Pennsylvania law just doesn't speak to whether that is allowable or not. There is a lot of opposition from, you mentioned Exxon, from fuel dealers, American Petroleum Institute, against utilities owning stations. Sheets recently testified in the legislature very strongly against that. I think if there is a role that is going to be carved out for utilities in owning stations, it is likely going to be in underserved communities where you're providing public access to charging, more of that level 2, community-based charging. I don't see us getting into owning the big DC fast chargers. That's becoming a pretty mature competitive business. It's a mature competitive business where probably no one is making money now. I'd say almost surely nobody is making money. So whether in the long term it is going to be a viable competitive business remains to be seen. So I would say the law is evolving in that regard. It's fast moving. The availability of the federal dollars right now is crowding out any need for utility direct investment beyond the incentives that we offer. How the market evolves over the next few years remains to be seen. I hope that's a fair answer. Yes, gentlemen, both of you guys.
Do you happen to think that we privatize would be a viable investment to privatize and set up these docks and charging docks?
Would it be a viable investment? I don't know, like I said, I don't think anybody's actually making money on charging now. Tesla has by far the best network, although they seem to be making some crazy decisions in the last couple of days. Tesla's the gold standard for charging. It's fast, it's convenient, it's a great app, very integrated. Are they making money on charging? Probably not. But it's a great amenity that when people are looking at what I want to buy an EV, which EV do I want to buy? Oh, I know the Tesla network is the best, and I can get that. They get the best volume usage on their stations. Personally, I don't know if you can speak to that, but their utilization levels are really high, right?
Yeah, certain locations are higher than others. Russia's really high, definitely numbers really high. Fishtown, Allegheny Avenue has some of the ones that are really high usage.
Yeah.
I just recently bought a Tesla. And for someone like me, where my house, I don't have a garage, I don't have a place to charge at home, I strongly rely on closest Tesla station to me, which is Farms gas station.
So what we know,
We'll look at them, like, to say, like, if they have service with them, how much are they using it? Or is the capacities, like, the highest ones are like at 90%, if they have the lower ones may be at the 40% or 50%. Because we're watching that, just if you ask for it, you have to use it, and build certain, rate, certain rate things, so that if they're not using it for this work, they're operating like that. So,
They're for home use.
no, this is sort of a charging station, out in the public.
So how would they separate home use if you have one at home from your regular electric bills?
we
You know?
Yes.
So it's all on one meter. So a
Yeah.
person got to be very conscious whether they want lights in their home or their car charge. Something will go high.
yes, so most homes have capacity in the home for putting in EV charger. So most people who own an EV would put in, if they have a garage, a level 2 charger. And all the data shows about 80% of charging of EVs is done by people in their own home. So everybody's an EV charger. I recently had from Harrisburg, went to the Flyers game, had to drop a friend off, and I was almost out of charging. We go in there, packed, they all drank. But I also, other than taking long distance trips, in 5 years of being an EV owner, I think I've used fast charging station maybe 6 times. Other than that, I'm charging home.
Is there a cutoff for charging? Say it reaches peak, is there a cutoff on the charging itself? It shuts down, say no more?
Set it.
You said it that
Yeah,
way?
my Tesla I set for 80%.
Yeah.
I know the sound wave would continue on in the way it sells out. But also, on the electromagnetic field, since we got cell phone towers, train stations, electrical vehicles being increased, and putting these EVs everywhere, what protection would it give the environment in terms of electromagnetic field being emitted?
I have not seen anything that says, that even expresses concerns about EVs and EMFs. Like when you do a DC fast charger, to keep those cables from heating up, those things are really heavily insulated. And that's one of the questions in designing, is to take it aside if folks are interested. I talked earlier about, if you were interested in planning and design, EV charging stations are a great future because fast chargers have to have bigger, heavier cords with lots of insulation so they don't overheat, but they're also less maneuverable. And there's no standardization of where cars' charge ports are placed. Tesla's in the back driver's side. My car is on the front driver's side of the Nissan Ariya, the Nissan Leaf, the center. They're all, no, I'm sorry, my charger was on the front passenger side. But it's all over, so you need to build the cords so that they're both heavily insulated, they don't overheat, but they're flexible enough to get around to cars that are in different parking spaces with charge ports in different locations. Then you get the level 2 chargers, which are, there's a lot of rubber or whatever insulation, even on like the one you have in your home. The cord is probably about that wide for a level 2 charger, and I can't imagine the actual wire is more than like that. So a lot of insulation building. I'm not really any concerns on EMF. But I would say, what is the easiest now? Didn't talk at all about environmental benefits and why this is an environmental benefit. And to drive a mile with an EV, you have 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions of a conventional vehicle. You have 0 criteria street level pollutants. Talked about school buses earlier. I won't talk about transit buses. when you talk about school buses, can you talk about what are we putting out into the atmosphere in a more like urbanized county like Delaware County, certainly the city of Philadelphia? Anybody ever sat on a street corner, you got hit with a blast of exhaust?
I wasn't sitting on it, just leaving.
Zero with an EV. And that has real measurable health benefits, especially on those hottest summer days when kids like one of my son who has asthma get sent to emergency rooms. You know, I talked about the repair benefits of EVs. The biggest benefit is on the environmental side. Climate?
Solar.
Oh, yes. I actually did some research on that. I will say, as an EV owner, full disclosure, you are going to lose on a really cold winter day about 30% of your range on EVs. If anybody's telling you otherwise, they're not being honest. 30%, you know, if you're lucky, maybe some vehicles that are better on that than 20. My experience is still 30% lost range. Yes.
I will point out that Seth just retired, last 4 diesel plows were all hybrid.
All right.
We had like an event for it.
No, that's great. Exactly. When I went to school in the city, I used to jog and got hit by a couple street corner blasts. So at one time, so that Chicago case, I did some research on that because that got a lot of coverage. That is one Fox News report, one that got amplified all around the country. It was primarily Uber drivers who were reliant on one Tesla fast charging station in downtown Chicago, who, because yes, they were losing range because it was very cold, and they got backed up in line because everybody wanted to charge at the same time. And this has become like a national argument against electric vehicles. You need, as things grow, you need to have charging stations to accommodate. And yes, you do when you're planning out the system, you need to take into account that people will have shorter range if you're in a more northerly climate and you're going to have those very cold days. But
I've been in line on the turnpike for a gas station on a busy afternoon, in the summer,
Yeah.
going somewhere. There's still lines of gas stations too.
Thank you. There is, I think, unfortunately, an effort to throw a lot of stones at electrification. And certainly, Mr. Musk has made it easier and more desirable for people to throw stones at electrification with some of his statements and actions. The environmental benefits are unquestionable. The fuel-saving opportunities are unquestionable. The maintenance needs to be fully proved out, but I think are pretty obvious. If you're interested in energy security, virtually 100% of the electricity consumed in this country comes from this country. We have a little bit of hydropower that comes from Canada. You can look around the world, and a lot of people who sell gasoline and sell oil are not necessarily our friends. They would like us to continue buying oil. I personally would rather say to use electricity, but that's just me. And I work for PECO, and you know what business we're in. So take that for what it's worth. But we really appreciate everybody coming to this session. Glad I didn't have to speak to an empty room. And I hope this was somewhat informative. And anything else, if you're interested in more information on our incentives, we have those out at our booth out front. And thank you for coming.